Hello everyone, a very good morning. On behalf of this course team and Faculty of Design, we welcome you all for the session of Reimagining Research Writing. I, Nidhi Ratani, will be your convener for and the host for this session. There are some logistic and points that I would like to bring into notice. The dialogue will be recorded for the documentation purpose and dissemination purpose. We hope that we have your consent for the same. All participants are requested to keep their handles on mute to avoid any disturbances in the recording. Please avoid keeping your web, WhatsApp, or your mobile phones on mode when your handle is unmuted. If it is convenient for you, we request that participants may keep their videos on during the session. Questions will be collected via the Google Doc sheet and link will be sent to you separately in the chat box. To avoid any disturbances to the presentations and link will be shared in the chat like I said. In case we face any issues with this meeting room, you get it and you get disconnected, please drop us an email and we will send you revised details in any case. I would like to invite my colleague Anshula to briefly introduce the speakers and the moderator to us. Yeah, over to you, Anshula. Thank you.
Thank you, Nidhi, and a very good morning to all of you. I hope you're all having a great week so far. It gives me great pleasure to introduce you to a very diverse mix of presenters who have agreed to spend a substantial amount of time discussing this session with us. Due to paucity of time, I will keep my introductions very short, but we can share more details with you after the session ends. In the order of the presentations, we have Shabari Rao. She's an independent artist, educator, and researcher based in Bangalore, India. Her work focuses on the relationship between body, identity, and power, and takes the shape of performing, directing, teaching, writing, and more recently, experimental film and audio work. Further, we have Samrithi Mehra, who's a video artist from Bangalore, India, and currently living and working in London, UK. Her work consistently deals with issues of labor, identity, memory, and movement in the urban sphere. Follow up, we have Sudhir Desai, who conceives, design, lead, and facilitate strategic transformations efforts, creating pathways to abilities for systemic well-being. In a career spanning over 30 years, he has led several national and global innovation initiatives, architected and designed complex systems in multinational environments. I want to take this chance to thank all the speakers who have joined us for accepting our invitation and being with us over here today. Thank you. I would now like to invite Ishita Shah, facilitator and instructor of the ongoing course and moderator for today's session, to set the context. Ishita is a designer, historian, and curator. Under her personal collective, she works in areas of cultural preservation, creative education, and community-based collections. Thank you, Ishita, and over to you.
Thank you, Nidhi. Thank you, Anshula, for getting us started. Thank you, everyone. So first of all, the students, because of whom we actually get this opportunity to discuss such an important burning topic, but also so many participants. I think this morning we were overwhelmed to look at the external registrations that we have got, and perhaps we are not ready for it. But we have figured out that the tech will not fail us. So happy to have you all on board. This also gives me the reason to clarify firsthand why we are recording, not just because we want to disseminate, but also we want this dialogue to be an ongoing dialogue. And I speak for the presenters and a few other colleagues who have been working in these areas. And because of which we feel that putting the video out there and the documentation out there allows for more of this dialogue to grow. As of now, the documented video, edited video will be uploaded on the personal collective, which I'm with you in the chat. So there, in case you miss out anything or you want to revisit this dialogue. And of course, we'll figure out with CEPT as well if the logistics work for them. Then we'll also upload it on CEPT University website or their channels. Before I take you all through the pre-discussion, the next important clarification or context which I would want to set is why are we doing it now and in this course? So this would be my fifth, sixth, I'm not very sure, attempt at doing a research writing or a critical writing course, mostly for graduating students. So it was at Shrishti, it's been at CEPT, or it's been for postgraduate students at either of these universities, or break out of this formal structure which binds what we do as research writing and somewhere, or even difficult because English is not, or writing is not something that everyone is very high about. And this is why this conversation needed to be positioned sooner than later. And with this group, which is as big and diverse as 60 students, we thought it could really help them position what they are doing and why they are doing research writing, not just because it's a mandatory elective in the curriculum, but because it can further their aspirations as a professional. And this is the intent which I really wanted to clarify, that here is a bunch of 65 undergraduate students from Faculty of Design who are our primary audience. And the entire discussion is governed around helping them understand what can happen with research writing. So with that, I'll take your permission to present. Nidhi, I hope I have the rights to present. Yes, okay. Okay, so you all would be able to see a pink slide. Yes, okay. I won't take too long. I just wanted to simplify the pre-conversations that we have had with the speakers for ourselves, for you, and for the students. And not to dilute it either. So I've only picked up what was important, but this doesn't mean that this matrix or this framework is really complete of what we have spoken about. But these were the key points, right? So we started discussing why do we research? What is this act of researching supposed to lead to? And we arrived at this agreement that yes, it's about knowing what to do or not to do. And in case of design, to know whether one should design also or not, right? So these have become very inevitable questions. And from there, whatever is unknowing, we arrive at a step where we want to translate or synthesize our findings. From there, we want to represent them in more than one forms, make it engaging, make it exciting, because we are creative thinkers and it's not just about writing another paper. And the idea of representation is usually double-sided with the whole idea of communicating. And this is where the whole idea of language or the form both sort of sometimes are seen in a clash as well, if I might say so, and which needs to sort of bring us back to the act of researching. So what I'm trying to say is that the idea of communicating findings here is not really a closed loop. It's really to open up newer conversations, more possibilities, more research, or more wanting to know. But what we know until now, and the students will be able to surely relate to this, that when we say act of researching, students have clarified to me, but what is it different than reading? Why is it different than reading a book? So that's what we think, that reading a book, reviewing an article, or analyzing a film is research. I mean, even analyzing a film is something that I'm going overboard to put it here. Similarly, when we say representations or translation, we think it's about making pie charts. It's about developing a framework, or we visualize image through images. And then finally, when it comes to communicating, we feel limited with the whole idea of writing or being able to only create, use certain kind of standards and only create audiovisual formats. And perhaps this is because we borrow from a few disciplines, right? So what is in it for a creative thinker? And I'm just going to use from my peers the sentences or phrases that we have been talking about. What about the relationships which cannot be researched through books or represented through visuals? This is the larger context of this conversation. Of course, there are many more layers to this. That is what we want the next set of dialogues to build for us. But at this point, through Shabari's work as an artist and a performer and an educator, then Smriti's work as a filmmaker and who has been trained in visual arts. And then when Sudhir talks to us about how we read into systems and understand these relationships, can we for ourselves and for the pedagogy of research writing allow for more representations and relationships to come in, to make the course more inclusive and more accessible. So that is about it. As far as setting up the context is concerned, each presenter will take about 25 minutes so that we have good 30 minutes at the end. Students, we are really expecting lots of questions from you all. You have to outnumber the professionals who are in the crowd. Ask us the most naive questions that you have, because this dialogue really needs to help you more than all of us. And we hope it will be a constructive dialogue and we'll all keep meeting again. I will moderate that last 30 minutes, but for now, over to Shabari and then Smriti and then Sudhir.
Okay, hello. So much fun to be here. I've set myself a timer, so I won't run over. Yeah, good morning, everyone, or wherever you are in the world. Hello. Hi, Smriti. Nice to see you. It must be super early for you, huh? Yeah. Okay, so research writing sounds a bit scary, so we're going to make it super simple to begin with, and it might almost feel like an oversimplification, but let's go with it, because it sometimes is a good place to start when things are really simple and really kind of at their basic kind of building blocks. So if we think about research as just finding out, you know, it might be you want to find out what's in your fridge. So you open the fridge. So just finding out, very simple. And we can think about writing in this context, at least, as sharing that finding out. Yeah, so you might send a WhatsApp message to your housemate to buy some extra milk because there's no milk. You might share it in some other way. So the basics we want to think about today is finding out and sharing. And in the middle of that, what Ishita had spoken about is processing that information or knowledge such that it is useful to the people that you are sharing it with. Yeah. So for example, if you open the fridge and you just take a photo and send it to your flatmate, they may not know what it is that you want them to see. They may not know what information is actually important. What you want them to do is buy some milk. So you need to say that, right? So you need to process that information in some way before you can share it on. So we're going to look at the simple kind of first step of research, which is collecting information, so data collection. Of course, in academic research, there's a lot that goes on before you actually get to collecting data, but we're going to just start there. We're going to start with data collection, okay? And for today's purposes, or for at least my kind of what I have to offer, we're going to look at the data that your senses collect, that your body collects, yeah? And that could be all your 5 senses. That's your visual sense, your tactile, your touch, your ears, smell, and taste, okay? And then we're going to look at processing it, somehow making sense of it, working with it a little bit, yeah? And then we're going to look at sharing it or offering it to somebody else. And that in turn, when you offer it to somebody else, that in turn becomes something that they are collecting through their senses. And so this kind of cyclical nature of research continues. So what you offer becomes an experience for somebody else. And then they process it, they think about it, and they pass it on in some way. And that then becomes experience for other people. So since we're talking about sensations and the body, The body primarily collects experiences, yeah? And you listening to me speak is an experience. You watching me as I'm speaking is an experience. But I would like, because I work so much with experience, I would very much like to make the experience a little bit more active. So I'm going to give you guys something to do, okay? It's very simple, and it's very basic and quite fun. But before we do that, what I wanted to say is often we have a bit of resistance to working with the body or to expressing with the body because we feel a bit shy. And a lot of, our culture and history and education and so many things tell us that actually the body is a distraction. The body gets in the way. So keep it quiet, keep it still, and also the body is a bit embarrassing, like doing something stupid or funny or whatever is like, oh my God, that's not serious, that's not cool, that's not academic, that's not research. But I beg to differ. So I would like for you guys to try this out with me, okay? I'm gonna see, yeah, okay, still good time. We are going to pay attention to the information that our body is collecting. And we're just gonna do this for 3 minutes, not very long. But we're gonna close our eyes because what tends to happen is that through our visual sense, we collect a lot of information. So much so that and kind of receptive, okay? So for the next 3 minutes, I invite you to close your eyes and just listen to me as I kind of say some things, or you might even listen to other sounds. So if you feel like you would like to, you can switch your videos off for the next 3 minutes. If you feel a bit kind of like you'd rather not be visible, that I get that, and you can switch your video off if you like. But for now, if you're ready, so just close your eyes. And you can start paying a little bit of attention to how your body is positioned wherever you are. So you don't need to change anything. All you're doing is just noticing how you're sitting. Where is the weight? Which parts of your body are touching other surfaces like the furniture or the floor? You might notice some sounds around you. With your eyes closed, you might notice the quality of the light. You might also begin to notice some thoughts and responses, your own internal responses to this activity. So you might start becoming aware of what is your response to this thing that we're doing. What does it feel like to close your eyes? Does it feel weird? Does it feel uncomfortable? Does it feel enjoyable? So you have sensorial and physical information. And you also have emotional and cognitive information. What does the air feel like on your skin? Is it warm? Or cool? What do the muscles in your face feel like? And how are you feeling? Are you getting a bit impatient or wondering where this is going maybe? That's information too. Okay, and you can gently open your eyes, allowing a lot more visual information to come in, which is okay. And now I'd like for you to find yourself a piece of paper and a pen. And for the next 3 minutes, I would like for you to just do some free writing. By free writing, I mean, don't stop writing and don't think too much. Just write whatever you feel like writing. You might find yourself repeating stuff. You might find yourself saying, I don't know what to write. I don't know what to write. That's okay. Just write. Okay? 3 minutes, free writing. This writing is not for sharing, so don't worry about the presentation element of it. This is the processing of the experience, so it's only for you. Just words or phrases, any language is fine. Don't stop, don't think. Okay, and wherever you are, just stop writing, or if you would like to finish that word or sentence or phrase, you can go ahead and finish it and then you can stop. Okay, and now what we're going to do is, so we've done the data collection. We've done the kind of like processing it in some way, like reflecting upon it or working with it in some way. And now we're going to do the presentation. Okay. So, you know, you have your name on your Zoom window, right? Like I have Shabari Rao written there. So I'd like you to allow one or phrase to kind of just allow it to bubble up. So don't think too much about it. On what we've just done, I'd like you to come up with one word or one phrase, and I'd like you to change your name. So if you click on those three little dots, you'll find a rename. Yeah. And then you just rename yourself, rename the thing with whatever whatever. Yeah, cool.
This is quite interesting. Once everyone's done, we need screenshots of this. We have a lot of interesting phrases coming out.
Yeah, yeah, super. Quite cool. It's as fascinating as talking. That's hilarious. Okay, and as the last thing in this this little exercise, I'm going to count backwards from 10. And if you could put your videos on for this, it would be great. I would like for you to allow your body. I definitely don't mean do or make, but allow your body to take a shape. And your shape might just have one bit of your body in the screen, which is fine. It may be your head, face, it may not be your face, that's okay too. You might have just one bit of your body in the screen, okay? So I'm going to count to 10. I'm going to count backwards from 10 to 0. And in that time, allow your body to take a shape that somehow for you is connected. You don't have to explain this connection in words, okay? So don't be bound by having to rationalize or somehow kind of explain this to anybody, okay? All right, here we go. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and freeze. Super, and release it. Good job, guys. All right, so that was a super simple, small journey through what you might call embodied research, in the sense of gathering information through your body. And notice that we did use text, okay? So text is not the enemy of embodied research. It just is not the only way in which you can share or present or even process or think about research. Text has a place in communication, for sure. It has a place in communication, but it's not the only tool we have. Yeah, I think that's my main kind of point that I'd like to make. If you'd like to rename yourself so that it doesn't say fascinating talking, I will rename myself. And then I would like to show a little film. So this is a very short kind of a film that I made that has been published in the Journal of Embodied Research. and it is a kind of offering of my understanding of embodiment in the time of social distancing. Okay.
Day after day, I encounter an unfamiliar version of myself. Slow, nothing to show. In a studio, on the street, working hard, the world that I inhabited. Now that world has changed. And I have to encounter this unfamiliar sense of self day after day with nothing to show.
Okay, thank you all. And I will hand over to Smriti.
Thank you for that, Shabari. It was beautiful to watch. I think this is the third time I've watched it, and every time there's still something new to take away from that piece. So I'm going to talk about the possibility of using video as a way to present research. I'm just going to share my screen with you. Do you see that full screen? Yeah, okay, great.
Yes, we do.
Excellent. So video can be a way to present research, and I'm going to talk you through how I have thought through this. Why video? Video is already perhaps a tool that you use to collect qualitative and exploratory research. So you might be doing interviews. Maybe you're not doing necessarily using video, but you might be recording it through sound. And video also lends itself to host text, sound, photographs, and moving image all in one place. So it's quite versatile in that way. You can bring in all these elements onto one sort of platform. What video can do? Video can include different voices. By that I mean you are not then bound to using only voices that you have read. You can include voices of people that are perhaps not writing. So who else who figures in your research that is not written about or does not write him or herself. If you are, if you'd say a carpenter or a masonry, that knowledge is not perhaps recorded firsthand by that person. So in a way, that research that you're doing, that primary research by interviewing firsthand yourself, somebody, that becomes a possibility to record and to bring in. Video also allows you to present, to evidence process. You can show process. You can actually show what it is to work with material. And I think that brings in the possibility of adding visual richness in a way that text can do if you are a very, very good writer. And it's perhaps harder to do because here you can actually show it. So in a way, it brings a different quality to the presentation. And of course, like Shabari has just said, that we're not looking at presenting research by eliminating text, but also working with it. You can and should, perhaps, you should include your written references and text. And video has a very simple way of doing that. You add subtitles or you add just text as presentation on the screen. And I think the biggest advantage of using video is that you can include what is unsaid, right? You can read what you don't say. So by showing a gesture or focusing on a pause in a conversation, not just the unsaid, but perhaps even seeing what is normally unseen. You can focus that lens in a different way. All right, before I go on to the next slide, I'm actually going to pause this presentation and share two anecdotes with you. I'm really glad that I have been given this opportunity to talk to students of architecture and perhaps interior design as well. And the reason why I am really happy about it is because when I did my final undergraduate diploma project at Srishti when I was a student, I did a project with migrant construction laborers. And I worked with sort of recording their views about things. The reason why I chose them was that my work had anyway been up until that point, I had already started looking at manual labor practices in and around Bangalore city. So working with migrant laborers was sort of, it fell into that category of my preoccupation with what I wanted to engage with. And I was interested in looking at the hierarchy that they dealt with, right? So and I was looking specifically at migrant laborers in one particular part of the city, which was in Whitefield, and laborers that were working on building houses for people. So it wasn't a very large construction site on like a big building, but houses. And to me, that was an interesting space to explore, because I thought, there's something really sad almost about the fact that you have a migrant laborers actually, who leave their houses and their homes far away to come into the city to build somebody else's dream house. And for that time, they are displaced from their homes, living in temporary shelters, to create somebody's dream house, which when it's completed, displaces them. And it was with this that I sort of would go and interview them and ask them about how they constructed or how they felt about their work, what it meant, and what was it like for them to deal with this. In many ways, it was very, very eye-opening, because we have a lot of preconceived notions about how perhaps somebody working in that domain, we spoke about what they think of citizenship, right? The fact that you are a migrant, you also removes the right of perhaps, say, voting at the time, right? You need to go back to your village to vote. So your rights as a citizen are sort of suspended in this time. And also talking about how they communicate with other people in the hierarchy. So the maestri that they report to directly. And then what is their interaction with the owner of the house, the person who's building the house, and also the architects and all these other people in this long chain of sort of power hierarchy. And my project was really just about, of course, focusing on their stories, but also, and in the end, for my final project, when I had my show in college, the project really culminated with bringing everybody onto the floor to have a discussion like this, to say that, can we talk about home? And can we talk about home as a way for all of us to be able to relate to each other? So the homeowner, could we use that as a way to speak to their experience of home? So I brought a few of the people that I had worked with, not everyone, because they had various commitments. And two people that came from Whitefield, Muthu and Shaktivel, two young men. They wouldn't have been much older than I was at the time. I was about 24 and they were probably in their mid-20s as well. College is, Shishti was in Yelahanka. And at that time, we shared a building with, Shishti was in the building that was the Malya Aditi school. And it was a very long way from Whitefield, that you're thinking at least 35 kilometers, if not more. So coming right across the city and into an institutional space. So I brought Shakti and Muthuvel in, and they entered the building and they got really excited. And they said, you see that roof over there on that part of the building? We actually laid that roof. And we've never been into this building, after that. We've never seen the building complete. And that left a lump in my throat that hasn't sort of gone away. My project came sort of full circle at that point. For me to bring them to the space where I was working was a way of sharing my idea of sort of giving back and including them in my work, showing them where I work and also including them in the larger conversation. And for me, that came full circle. In a way, this discussion with architecture students, to be able to bring my practice, it sort of comes back to this point where I can share this, and I'm sure all of you understand what I'm talking about. Another experience that I had was more recent. So about a year and a half ago, my mom renovated a flat that she had bought. There were some big structural changes that needed to be made, and it was a really harrowing experience for her. I was in London and she was in Bangalore, sort of dealing with having all this work done. And because it was a flat, we had the architect who sort of, worked out all the big structural changes. And there was an intern working in his office who was given the job of sort of, overseeing the renovation and designing other smaller aspects of it, like cupboards and, whatever changes in the kitchen and stuff. And what happened in this process was that there were cupboards that needed to be built in my mother's bedroom. And the intern had designed these beautiful cupboards. So they were going to be of glass because the space was not very big. And we didn't want to just have like plain sort of board or very, a lot of heavy color in that space to make it to make it look open. She said, look, it might be nice to use glass, like a frosted glass, and have a wooden frame. All right, we were all very excited about it. And she made drawings that she sent to me. I was sitting here. I looked at the drawings. They looked really beautiful, clean. And my mom and me, of course, our discussions were more about the shelving and the drawers and what that configuration was going to be. So we said yes to her drawings and it went back. And when I went home to finally move my mom, we realized that these lovely cupboard doors, which now, of course, when I'm even saying it, you will understand, big glass doors, pretty thin because they were glass, from the bottom, like from the floor to the ceiling. Now, when you opened them and you used them, it felt fragile. It was too long, and in terms of structure, it lost structural strength because of the length of the door. Needless to say, because they felt a bit flimsy, we were sort of upset about it, and we spoke to the carpenter and we said, look, these doors just don't feel like very solid, and can you reinforce it? Is there something that can be done? And at that point, the carpenter told my mom that and me that I spoke to madam. And I told her that this design would have this problem, but she was insistent that it had to be done this way. And of course, I think what I'm trying to tell you here is also that the carpenter didn't think to actually bypass the designer to actually go and perhaps talk to my mom, who would have understood it. And there was that gap between this communication. And so we are left with a product that is not perhaps ideal. It functions, but not great. The point being that there are all these hierarchies that you're dealing with in this space of construction. Now, I'm not proposing that you break down all social and economic barriers that exist, but to actually view this as a collaborative effort that requires everybody's skills to come to the table and to perhaps view it as the collaboration that it is and needs to be able to realize the vision that is your design. And here is where this inclusion of voices, where I say this inclusion of voices in your research comes into play. And I strongly urge you to sort of explore these possibilities, because these are the kind of voices, these are the kind of conversations that perhaps are not, don't figure as strongly in research, because in research you're talking about different things. Using video to present research. Think about video as a parallel to writing research. How do you quote? You can quote, and it's the most beautiful way to quote, where you can have a person speaking, or you can use their voice. You can also cite references. You can cite references that are textual. But you still do need to make an argument or a case for, right? You have to still edit your argument. You've got to edit and frame your research. In terms of form, you follow the same structure. You have an introduction, you have the body, that is the research, and you finish with a conclusion. I also would propose that you could actually look at an addendum, which text as well uses, where you can synthesize this document and conclusion, but you could synthesize parts of that documentation to come into an addendum that sort of feeds into what you have been talking about. While using video, you also need to consider ethics, right? It's a very different set of ethics that you need to consider because of the medium itself. For example, somebody conscious, and the quality of your engagement with that conversation might be impeded by the fact that the camera is present. So you might find that actually it's better to record sound, and then you can always use different layers of visual information. So you can go to photographs, or you can resort to putting visuals of what the person is talking about, and it gives you a lot of there's a lot of freedom to actually play with that space and be creative with it. Other ethical issues apart from consent is the fact that you need to be really conscious about who sees this research, what is the audience. And here I think the difference between text and video is that if you are working with somebody, and you have, say for instance, interviewed a contractor and you have interviewed workers. If you are writing a textual document, it's very unlikely that they would read your 15,000 word thesis. But now that the form has changed to video and you have made recordings, this becomes more accessible. It's accessible to a lot more people. So is this research going to be, who is this research going to be viewed by, becomes a very important question. It becomes important because if it is shared more than say what a textual document would have been, then you need to consider what is the relationship of power that exists between all the people that are perhaps talking in your research, and make sure that you take care of their interests, even if they don't think about how it might impact them. By that, I mean that if you are working with somebody who is at the bottom of the chain, like the migrant worker, and you have interviewed also his boss, the maestri, what will that interaction of what the worker says have on him if the maestri were to actually listen to what you have recorded? So these are things that you need to take into consideration. Be very mindful of the fact that what you present could impact somebody else's situation in terms of their work and in terms of the power dynamics that they are embroiled and imbricated in, really. What video cannot do. Video cannot disguise illegibility. Your argument, your research still has to be legible. You cannot circumvent that. Changing the form is not going to make that process easier, and you still have to be committed to that. Also, video cannot substitute subjectivity for objectivity. So you cannot fall back and say that, oh, I'm going to go to this form of storytelling and therefore not answer the difficult questions that I'm in search of. That will be very obvious. There are also parallels with writing that one can look to, and one of them is recording the self versus writing the self. And I think this follows beautifully from what we've just seen with Shabari's work and what she has said. There are different ways in which you record yourself, whether it's through movement, whether it's through voice. These are things that you can play with. You can, when you write about the self, you think about journals, you think about diaries. When you're recording for yourself, what would that be? You can use voice memos on your phone for taking notes. You can record yourself. You can get somebody to interview you, where so that it becomes a way of sort of clarifying your own thoughts in a way that writing does, right? When you speak, you articulate. It's very different from thinking. So I would say, pay attention to how you could record for yourself. And writing might be one way of adding to it. I'm not saying that it needs to be either or. Writing figures in this process. In any case, you have to script your research, and it's a way of working with rather than eliminating it from the equation. At the end, I would just like to end by saying that video can, not because you can't write, but because video can do it differently. So don't go to video because you think that it's a way to circumvent the problem. It's not a versus, it's a difference. And with that, I will pass it on to Sudhir.
Thanks, Smriti. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Am I audible? Okay. I'm going to share my screen a little bit, but before I do that, I just want to kind of contextualize my talk a little bit. So you've heard two wonderful uh, insights into the use of the body as a medium, the use of the video as a medium, a lot about how research is done. When Ishita posed this issue to us, I think one of the things she said was, maybe I can bring a systems perspective to it. So what I'm going to show you today doesn't have as much, I'm not going to repeat what you've heard. I'm going to emphasize a little bit on what is this systems thing? And I don't know to the extent to which you guys have had formal exposure to this idea. So there's a little bit of like, what is systems? Does that really help us understand anything better, right? And so let me see if I can contextualize things as I talk through this, right? So did Ishita send you anything about watching a movie? Anybody?
Yes.
You can turn on your microphones. I actually would like you to turn on your microphones so that we can talk. Hello?
So I watched the Daisies one.
No, but did you watch Monsoon Wedding? Did you watch? Mostly
No, I watched
okay.
Daisies in the other video.
Okay. How many people saw Monsoon Wedding?
I did.
Okay. I mean, this is, or have seen it before. I mean, it doesn't matter whether you saw it now, whether you saw it before. Did you see it? Can I get a sense? Because it's not going to, most of my conversation is based around this idea, right? So did people see it? Like generally 50%? Half of them?
Yes. Yeah, I saw it. I've seen it.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
good.
Yeah, there are
All
a lot of hands
Okay.
up.
Okay, good. Okay, good. Okay, so we're going to have a conversation about this thing. So let me now share my screen. And okay. Am I sharing? Share whiteboard, share. Where is the screen thing? Share desktop. Okay, share. And okay. Can you guys see it?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. So what we're going to do is I'll try, let's, in the next 20 minutes, see if we can answer a couple of questions, right? So what does it mean to take a systems perspective? Does such an approach create value, right? Because all this is about research and writing. And like here is somebody coming and saying, take a systems perspective. So you got to figure out whether or not this is worth it. And then what does that look like, right? So what I did was I asked you to watch a movie or at least have some reference point with which we can talk, right? So just, I want to like a one-liner. What did you guys think about the movie? And don't, I'm not interested in the story. I'm just interested in what you thought it was, it was. What did you get from it? Anyone? Because you don't eat, let silence not eat 20 minutes, right? Poses a lot of questions, right?
Oh, yes,
Opens up
yes.
this whole space of like, what the heck is this, right? Anyone else?
And why wasn't I allowed to watch it? It was not supposed to be watched.
Yeah, you were one of those possible renegades, right? Then who else?
Yes, I was not supposed to watch that movie. All right.
Couple of other voices, please.
So I would like to share my thought. So since we are talking about system, but I have not seen the movie what you are talking about, but I can relate to is Inception. If you know, so Inception is basically a movie where they the idea of the movie is where they sort of try to connect different systems of thoughts, where they call it going into someone's dream. So that is very interesting to notice that how everything is linked but not real, and then you start to question everything. Yes.
Okay, so that's interesting. Let's hold that thought for a bit, okay? Because I think it might be relevant towards the end. But I'd like you to kind of, let's refer back to this one particular artifact, because we're going to try and kind of deconstruct it a little bit, right? I want you to see how the system. So guys, what do I have to do to get you to talk? Because maybe I can shut you off or something. Say it. What did you say? Nice and bad.
Niyati, you had mentioned that you have watched the film. Can you tell us what is it that came to your mind when you were watching it?
Okay, yeah, sure. So when I was watching it, I watched all the all 3 videos that were shared. So for Daisies, I could not I was quite confused while watching it, because I couldn't relate to the context directly. But when I started watching Monsoon Wedding, you kind of see these things around you. So it wasn't something which was you need to understand or you need to think a lot. As soon as the Tej character was introduced and you saw Ria's reaction to it, you kind of understood where that was going, even though it was revealed much later. But as soon as as soon as those 2 characters had their first interaction, I knew that okay, this was gonna go on that tangent. Or let's say when the very first scene when Nasiruddin Shah's character was introduced, I kind of understood, because you do see these kinds of people around you in during Indian weddings. So I thought that, but nobody talks about it. Then there's the other thing, nobody talks about it. So
okay. So Niyati, we'll keep it short, sorry, so we can listen to more voices.
Short, but this was very good. This was very good. Yes.
This was very nice. Yeah.
Couple more. Yeah.
Okay. Who wants to go?
Yeah, Drishti had also seen this movie. So Drishti, do you want to add on to something?
And then Aditi had
did you say that?
Sorry.
I didn't see. Oh, okay, sorry.
Now everybody wants to talk. Okay, so we are going to do Aditi, Manali, Drashti. I think these are the 3 names. Let's go in sequence. Aditi, go.
I thought it was a very interesting contrast, because Monsoon Wedding was a life that all of us can recognize and be familiar with, whereas Daisy's was in a lot of ways, speaking as a girl, it's a life we want to lead. Just being destructive and indulging in everything that we want to do.
Cool. Manali, or whoever's next.
Yeah, so for Monsoon Wedding, I think it is very typical kind of movie situation which is shown 20 years back. So if I see this movie today, and I can understand and relate things which used to happen in India in typical families in those times. So it was very easy to relate to today's time, but the situation might differ right now, but some things are still similar which can be seen today also.
Wonderful, wonderful. Who else? One more.
I have seen the 3 of the video, and what I have perceived is 3 of them is a different context and different message behind them. One is the micro level, the concept of the message they convey is to the point, and to micro level. The second one is the message they have convey is what we perceive and what they want to convey. on that. And the third one is what we see, what Niyati told, like the things are happening all around us, and we are familiar with that thing. So the
Right.
message is
Excellent.
different.
I love it. I wish it was more than 20 minutes because we could really like just take one thing, right? I mean, just the monster. So why do you think I picked up the thing, right? Because here's the core of the argument. The core of the argument is if you think this was a good movie, and basically a movie is nothing but a designed artifact, right? Somebody designed it, right? So it's some designer working and produced this thing like Smriti or, Shabari or something. Shabari puts plays together, Smriti puts movies together. So here's a designer who put something together. And what I think makes it interesting is because it reveals something that comes, there are lots of movies that have Punjabi weddings in them, but this isn't yet another wedding movie, right? In some sense, there is something going on here, which let's see if we can find what's going on over here. That makes it interesting, and that shows a certain understanding, a deeper understanding of society, of weddings and things like that. And my argument over here for you today is that that understanding is systemic. That understanding that is inbuilt into this product is what we call a systemic understanding, right? And you guys somewhat referred to all this micro, macro, how things are changing, all this kind of stuff. It's just that we don't, just like, things that are of systems approaches provide us access to these complicated worlds. So imagine yourself now, for those of you who've seen Monsoon Wedding or know about it, that you as architects or interior designers have been called to design a Haveli, right? By one of these Punjabi guys, right? Smriti, excuse me, I'm referring to Punjabis here, but Punjabi guys, right? And they say, ki humko Haveli bana do, right? And you say, ki I want to understand, right? I'm not from Punjab. I don't really understand the wedding, right? And not weddings. I don't understand Punjabi culture. I don't understand what this Haveli needs to do, right? And so this is maybe one of the reasons why you say that I need to understand something and I've got to do some research. And then I have to pick something where I can learn something about the culture. And maybe I choose to research it through a wedding. Just like Smriti went to a construction site, you decide that you will go to a wedding, right? So let's assume that Meera Nair is a designer, yeah? Now, one of the things I want to give you a caveat is like something that Smriti referred to that I think is very important. The world of design has changed. The idea that there is a single designer, of course, we know that that's not true in a movie, and that's not true about this thing, right? So when we are talk about design, I mean, we've got to include the construction laborers, and we've got to include the supervisors, and we've got to include the owners, and Smriti's mom, and Smriti, and everybody else has to be a part of this process of design. So obviously, one of the challenges of writing is not to see it purely as an academic idea, right? Because when you combine the word research and writing, it seems as if it is mostly about research and academia, but maybe it is research to understand something and then writing in order to like get designers together, right? Co-designers together, which includes the construction workers and the architects and everybody else. So if Meera Nair is this person, let's assume for now, right? This is typical, right? She uses screenplays. I mean, at the end of the whole process, like she'll write a screenplay and she'll make storyboards and stuff like that, right? But the thing is, we can go from, if you ask a Punjabi and you say, why are weddings the way they are? They'll say, hum to aise hain, we are like this only, right? This is how we are, right? But is that enough for a researcher, right? Because a researcher cannot just accept the fact that we are like this only. I think the real question for a researcher is, why are we the way we are, right? And so this issue of questioning something, there is something that we don't quite know. And what we are going to talk about will show you that what you see, these patterns that we are used to, there's something else that is known or unknown that is taken for granted, that happens, right? And not knowing what those things are can actually make or break a design, right? Not understanding some of these things that make these systems work. So what might, we have to think about this, and maybe not right now, but what might be some of the questions that Mehra was researching? Did she think that she understood Punjabi weddings and therefore there was nothing else? I mean, she's a Punjabi and therefore there's nothing else to understand, right? Just let's start making a movie, right? Or what kind of questions, given that you've seen the final artifact, what kind of questions do you think she was asking? Or like one of you said, how are weddings changing?
The kind of relationships.
Yeah. How are relationships? What are the relationships? How are they changing, right? What about, yeah, go ahead.
How there is an uncertainty of a future and there are promises of a better life.
Lovely, lovely, very nice, very nice, yeah. What about demography? What about urban, rich and poor? What about urban, rural? What about?
Social hierarchy. The way in which it is shown, the social hierarchy is also important.
A significant amount of the film was focused on, what's his name? The game, the marigold flower eater in Alissa, right? How much of the footage of the film was about that? Do you think that was accidental? So there's something Mehra wanted to say, right? Something that she wanted to say. And obviously, I don't know to what extent she knew about it beforehand, right? So since you guys are architects, you'll relate to this question here, this quote here, which says, always design a thing by considering it in its next larger context, right? You've seen this? You know this quote? Chair in a room in a house in an environment in a plan, city plan, and so on and so forth, right? So you go from the particular to the, from the particular to the more general, right? But the thing is, you ultimately then have to come back because you've now learned something bigger and then you bring it back. So before you go design and here the designed artifact is not the wedding, right? Because somebody's designing the wedding and somebody's making a film, and we want to make sure that, we understand the difference here, right? So we want to come back to this. So one way of saying is, okay, what's a wedding, right? And then here are some images that kind of, unsettle this idea, right? Can you imagine the Punjabi wedding with two gay, with gays, right? Or a wedding of people who are not yet that, that prosperous? Or does this Thai wedding look somewhat like the Indian wedding, right? So do you think Mehra might have had questions about, what is the general idea of the wedding? Like if I'm going to go from a chair to a room to a landscape, do I have questions about like, is this movie still going to be relevant 10 years from now? Like, would people still be able to relate to the idea? Is there something that endures in this design, right? Is there something that is not particular to a particular time, but transcends time, right? How do we know that, right? What can we say that says that this, right? So really speaking, I think, what we're looking at, and how many people know this story from the Indian Jataka, right? At least you heard of this, right? 6 blind men of the elephant. So we have a tendency that we are looking at this thing and we just say, it's like this, right? I already know what it's like, right? It's like this or it's like that, right? But I think the researcher is basically just lots of, is it like this, right? And the real thing is, am I understanding the elephant or am I just understanding a part of the elephant, right? So this whole systems idea is fundamentally saying, how do we construct the elephant? What is the elephant in this case? And how do we build that elephant, right? Rather than saying, I think I know what the elephant looks like. So because this is a very short 20-minute thing, and I think I've already eaten half of it, I'm going to rush through this, right? So it turns out that this elephant, how do you know that question, how do you eat an elephant, right? Everybody knows that question, how do you eat an elephant? You basically eat it one bite at a time, right? That's the smart answer. So it's like, what's the bite here? It turns out that these bites are, we look at this issue from the economic perspective. So some of you brought up the fact that, the wedding idea has a social perspective. Can anybody tell me what might be a political perspective? I just give you some images, but in the movie, did you see any political perspectives? So what do you think Alyssa and the other person's relationship, what kind of political issues might that be? It was interreligious, intercaste, right? Here in the background was a big wedding that was all about us belonging to a particular community, right? And here you were seeing a contrasting image of a different idea that was not based on the notion of this thing, but was based on the notion of love, right? And it was between a Christian and a Hindu and all the associated things, right? Do you think there is a political dimension to it? What about the politics within the family? What about the politics of, do you think if the girl was less than 18, that marriage could have happened? Was there a concern about age, underage, overage, and what is possible with age? So who makes the laws that says that weddings can only be like the girl needs to be 18 or both the couple needs to be 18? Do you think there is a legal aspect to it? Right? So there are laws, there are, all kinds of things that are happening, right? That have to do with what is a wedding, right? What is a wedding? Because where is what allowed, right? The scales, like we just said, there are laws at the at the country level, there's a laws at the state level, there's a laws at the religious level, right? What's possible within a religion, what's possible, how it's done. We see the material and the energy and the information, right? But let's talk about knowledge. Who in that wedding, right? And now I'm talking about the wedding itself. Who has the knowledge? What is the knowledge that is necessary and who has it? Anyone? Who knows what should be done when?
The Pandit.
Pandit? Yeah. What about what colored saris people should wear?
The elders, like the old aunts and all, they have established that some color won't be worn in some occasion. So
there you go.
They might be telling.
Right. So who welcomes the Bharat? What is that rule? So you remember at the end, they basically said, you know, the eldest person in the family should go welcome the Bharat, and then there is this conflict, and then people say, no, you can't go, and all that, right? What about ideas of patriarchy? What about ideas like how are they being contrasted? Ideas of patriarchy. What does that event manager's mother do? Guys, it would have been really nice if some of you had watched it and at least contributed, like, you know, what you thought. What did that?
Yeah, Dubey's mother was participating in share market trading.
Yeah. And so, do you remember, like, does Nasiruddin Shah use a computer?
No, he does not. He's like, I can't do that. It's too much. Yeah, it's too much for me.
What about Dubey? How is he? How technologically savvy is he?
He has a mobile phone, and even though it costed like 12 rupees a minute to talk, he would still be talking on it all day long.
Exactly. Now, do you see Mira's mind working here? Do you see systems of technology adoption? Right? Where who seems to be?
Sorry,
Go ahead.
and not just that. Another thing that I noticed was when the engagement ceremony is happening and Nasiruddin Shah is asking, like, what would you like to drink? And the groom's mother is like, I'd like the same. It's like scotch with 2 ice cubes. So, and he did not know, like, so Nasiruddin Shah did not know the exact term for it. Sorry, I forgot. Even I don't know. I don't drink that much.
No,
And
so you bring up another point, right? Interesting point. Sorry.
And then you have Nasiruddin Shah nagging to his wife that why are you smoking, or if you're smoking, just use a better air freshener. And the wife's like, yeah, but then your Samdan also drinks, so why are you nagging me? So
right. Yeah. So there is all this change happening, right? And values, right? The questions being posed are you being hypocritical, right? Where is the hypocrisy in all this, right? Where, who is the keeper of morals? Where are the values being kept? Who's the keeper of morals? Who's the keeper of knowledge, right? So you see, these are all systems. These are cultural systems. These are social systems. These are political systems, the rules and the things that are there. And so much of it is not documented anywhere. So much of this is not necessarily written, right? And we're talking about a wedding, being able to read a wedding and having the literacy to understand how this works, so that only those elements get included in that product. And if you notice, you will notice this is what she wants to tell us, right? This is what Mira is trying to tell us. That look at how this society is, look at how this society is responding. Who's changing, who's not changing, who's adopting technology, who's not adopting technology. So typically what happens is what we are seeing, systems, typically you'll see that when all systems literature use this kind of an iceberg model, which is what you see on top above the, icebergs are not our, reference, because we have very few of us have actually seen icebergs, but onions, right? I mean, it's like things are layered, right? There's lots of layers to this complex thing, right? And if we pay attention to them, we'll discover that there are underneath all these things are deeper ideas and deeper systems at work, systems of culture, systems of belief, systems of practice, and so on and so forth, all of which actually are necessary to produce the wedding. The wedding isn't just about putting up a tent and doing all this stuff, because all this other stuff is necessary for it to be the way it is, right? And that's the real idea here, right? So essentially, therefore, what are systems like? I mean, systems are like icebergs. There's a lot, like I think Smriti also talked about it in her talk, and Shabari also did, which is how do we learn to see what is unseen, what is unknown. Because that is what you as a designer, if you just replicate some understood idea of the Haveli and understood idea of Punjabi culture, right? You haven't really understood what makes it work. And what makes it work is all hidden. It's all uncovered, and you got to bring it all back. You got to show it, reveal it, right? So a lot of the research work is fundamentally, and particularly from a systems perspective, is about finding out the relationship between parts and wholes. What is the part, how do the parts come together? What's the whole? What's the elephant look like, right? Where are the boundaries? Where does it stop being a Punjabi wedding, right? Where does it stop being a wedding altogether, right? What are the relationships, right? And how is this thing embedded in other things, right? The idea of the wedding is embedded in the idea of the family, is embedded in the idea of culture, right? Being a Punjabi means you have a wedding of this kind, right? And so they exhibit these patterns, and sometimes they don't quite make sense, right? Because they behave in ways that are counterintuitive. You think it should be like this, but it doesn't quite work that way, right? That's not what happens. So when we kind of start to pull all these things together, what initially looked like one mess starts revealing patterns, underlying patterns, right? We start seeing networks, we start seeing connections between things. And this is, I'm also starting to now say, you take what you have learned and what you've observed, and you try to start making sense of it. And you start making sense of it by using devices like this, where you start making social network diagrams or other things, right, that we're going to see. So these patterns, now you've got, Smriti talked about it, the role of the image. Because a collection of images, and you are very used to this, a collection of images, a collage like this, can start showing patterns of color. Now, one of the reasons I had put daisies in there, daisies is a study in color. It's one of those, movies that all film students watch, right? It's a very, it's a standard part of films, film education. And it's a wonderful study in just the notion of color, right? Color and pattern. It's a phenomenal thing, right? So it's a great visual experience and so on and so forth. So if you look at these things and you just start to say, okay, what's the role of color here? Is this the color? Is there a language here? Is color trying to say something? Is the prominent use of saffron and yellow, how does that relate to Punjabi culture, right? Or is it Hindu culture? What is it, right? Why are colors the way they are? What's the role of red, right? So anyway, so as you see, this elephant has many dimensions, and then you start seeing bigger relationships. You start seeing the relationship of the wedding to a larger idea in society and how it relates to other concepts. Because in this movie, there are all kinds of other things happening, right? There are migrations, there are people who have moved out of the country. They're bringing back ideas that are different, right? Ideas of what women should be or could be has changed, right? So all of these things, like you said, smoking versus drinking and all this. And so there are these larger relationships in which these ideas are embedded. They become relevant. I'm not saying they're incidental. I'm saying they're relevant to this. The reason why this movie becomes interesting to some extent is because there is a background, there is a foreground and a background, and the background is starting to tell us something about what's happening in the foreground, right? So we asked, and you haven't asked the question how things are changing. And you design it because it has been called a Haveli, and you design it with some idea of the past, it'll break down, right? It'll break down because it won't work. So asking these questions. So therefore, how do we kind of put all these documents together? How do we describe these things? So here's, for example, an understanding of the human body. You on the one side, you can see it as a machine. On the other side, you see organic things. You see small parts. You see big parts, cells. So there are all these devices that I've listed on the right hand side. The network diagram, the flows, the boxes and arrows. But I think more importantly, there are stories. There are stories that need to be woven together into narratives. And because these complexities are very difficult to describe otherwise, right? So what do you represent? How do you represent what you have learned? What you have researched, what you've discovered, what you've learned? That becomes the narrative, that becomes a script, that becomes whole again, right? And the whole, right? So you might use devices like this. Let's say if you only wanted to describe the family relationships, maybe it'll look like this, right? Some family trees, genealogy, maps of this kind, right? Or you might have maps like this. Where did the people come from? Or, where did they come from originally? Where have they come together? But the moment you start seeing the other people that are involved, then you start getting layers, right? Layers of understanding. And that they all need to come together in order for us to understand, right? So the idea of timelines, like how did grandmothers do it? How have we always done it versus how are things changing? Like somebody said, what's the idea of the future? Where's this wedding going, right? So there are ideas of timelines and how timelines can show us what remains the same, what happens together, what changes, right? So ultimately what happens is we peel the elephant. We've taken it apart, right? We've taken it apart in all these different ways. And now it's the time to put it all together, right? And it isn't necessary that it will be Mira's elephant. It is Mira's elephant, and the way Mira puts it together, because she decides what is it. And somewhere, if you were to ask Mira, what is a wedding? She might say it's like a ginger, right? Or she might say it's like a circus, or the event is like a circus, or it's like a mela, right? So you did all this research, you found out all this stuff, and then you kind of derive some kind of an essence out of it. It's like, what you got to put this whole thing back to. And if there is one thing about systems, it is the art of synthesis. Is the opposite of analysis, is the opposite of taking things apart, is putting things back together, right? And that might then become the script, and that becomes the writing, right? So the writing over here isn't an idea of a single artifact, but a complex, rich understanding of something that, we could otherwise take it for granted. This might be something that you are used to because you're architects. Brings to your work. Thank you. Ishita, you can take over.
Thank you, Sudhir, Smriti, and Shabari. I think, first of all, for keeping to time. I mean, I hope it wasn't too assertive, but I think we wanted to keep more time for discussion. But also, yes, I mean, just moving across embodied thinking to experiential, and if I might call the last one inquiry based or also evocative. I think it was a perfect mix of introducing the different kinds of richness of research that we wanted to or we had hoped for. And I'm sure more we take these conversations forward, we might find more ways of doing it. But for now, at least, it feels like you simplified it so much. Even I was enjoying making notes, and I hope students felt that way as well. So yes, we are quite on time. And yes, Smriti, I can see you raising your hand.
Sudhir, can you stop sharing your screen because we're seeing your desktop? And you're mute.
Mute, is it? No,
yeah.
Mute.
Yeah, so if you just go and stop sharing your screen. Not your video.
I think his Zoom has got closed, so he'll have to go into okay. All right.
I did.
Thank you, Smriti. Yes, so now we can see everyone and everyone's videos on, so we can see everyone's faces. If you are perplexed, if you are enlightened, if you are confused, still thinking, all of that is okay. So yes, I was just saying that we're quite on time. We can take 5 minutes to collect questions, right? Which also means that everybody can articulate what was happening, what was, I mean, it was 3 different kinds of conversations and one context which I had set out for the class. So why don't we take 5 minutes, which is until 12:20, and we'll collect questions on both platforms, because I'm realizing the Google document is not going to be able to take heavy traffic, and we are 92 of us. So Nidhi, we will open the chat for collecting questions for 5 minutes. So anybody who's not able to access the Google Doc, please put your questions in the chat, but you will still have to follow the same format. Tell us who it is for, or you can say it's for all the 3 speakers. Tell us what the question is, keep them brief. You can put more than one question, but keep them brief, and then undersign it. Tell us who is asking it. Yes, you can be more specific. You can ask questions about your own research questions or inquiries as well, whatever helps you. But just follow the format. So the chat is enabled. The link is there, as well as if you are not finding it accessible, the link has heavy traffic, then use the chat room, chat box, which we will close in another 4 minutes, so that while we are discussing, it's not too distracting. So it's going to be very simple. If you guys don't have questions, then we are going to ask you questions. So the ball is in your court. Either the questions come from you, or we come back and start picking you and asking questions of what you have understood, what you felt. I think everyone's forming questions. I can see things happening also on the Word document. So I think we'll take 5 more minutes. I think articulating questions will be a good idea, and then I can moderate it in terms of linking them one to the other. Hi, sorry, Shabari, I was talking. I didn't realize I was on mute. Thanks for letting me know. I started speaking a minute ago. Yeah, the tech is still not my thing. So I was basically saying the same thing. Yes, we have a lot of questions and you would need time to answer them. So we'll start. I was requesting that we'll call out the participants and they could pose the questions themselves. Keep it short, again tight. What you have written is perfect. And as students as well as audiences, please do quickly introduce yourself, who you are or what background or where you come from. It'd be nice to position the conversation. So we could start with the most basic question, which is about what Mr. Shishir is asking. Sir, if you would like to unmute and ask it yourself and introduce especially.
Good afternoon, everyone. My brief introduction is that I have been a teacher since 1986 and very fortunate to have studied in different parts of the US as well as in India. And currently I'm engaged with teaching research related subjects as well as systems related approach to landscape architecture and design. So that is my brief introduction. So it was very fascinating and interesting that different perspectives of understanding something and then presenting that. All the 3 presenters have done a fantastic job. But my throughout all these conversations or presentation, my question still remains, and that is what I'm grappling to teach whenever I teach research related or design research related subjects or conversations with my colleagues. What qualifies, what according to you qualifies as research and what doesn't qualify as research? There is a, once we know this, perhaps at a more fundamental level, or more, if not fundamental, let us know, just whatever level at which you want to describe your thoughts, that is fine. I just want to expand my own understanding, and that is why I'm asking this question to the three presenters. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Shabari, would you want to address that, and then we can move on to Smriti and Sudhir?
Okay, I think that goes like right to the heart of what we're talking about, because what counts as research is, of course, inextricably kind of linked to what counts as knowledge. So it kind of is a philosophical question because it talks about epistemology. What do we count as knowledge? What counts as worthwhile knowledge? What counts as stuff that we want to find out and share? I think within an academic setting, there has to be some kind of agreement upon what counts as knowledge. But as a practitioner, say for me, who doesn't necessarily have to subscribe to an academic framework, the scope of what can count as knowledge and what can therefore count as research is far expanded. So I don't actually need to begin my work, say, with a research question as we know it, from an academic setting, so from writing a thesis and so on. I can begin with a sense of curiosity about something which doesn't even have to be articulated in the form of a verbal question. Also just tracing a little bit the trajectory of what is counted as research is, so we started with, kind of scientific research, and then that expanded into more kind of research in the humanities, in stuff that is not so-called observable in lab conditions. So looking at how people live, looking at stuff that Sudhir was talking about, politics and culture and societies and history. So there is research in that. And then now we're kind of beginning to expand more into artistic research. And I think the contours of what counts as artistic research is still being developed. And I think one of the interesting things about artistic research is that the contours are, the idea is not to fix them, to keep it fluid, to keep what do we mean as research, something that is not pinned down, so that very question can continue to evolve and develop and grow, thereby increasing our idea and understanding of what counts as knowledge itself. I'll stop there.
Smriti?
I think that Shabari has put that beautifully. I think that there are also different ways that different practitioners approach research. So one is, of course, the academic, but, as Shabari said, artistic research doesn't necessarily start with a question of what it is that I necessarily want to know. As an artist, I myself, I don't frame a question before I start making work. I say, I might wonder about a certain area that I want to know more about. And it's just as simple as that. I don't know, and I don't want to presume anything. I wonder, can my question start from, I wonder what this is about, or I don't know enough about this, and therefore the research then starts from there. So I think there are different ways of understanding the world, and really research is about that, about framing a certain experience of knowledge that you are gaining for yourself before you even share it with anyone else. And so there are many ways of coming into it, not necessarily only academic, but there are approaches to it which are more expanded before they start to crystallize and articulate and sort of frame themselves in a way that begins to make sense.
Yeah.
Thank you, Smriti.
That's lovely.
Sudhir?
That's yeah. If I'll probably just add to what you've already heard, right? So I think first and foremost, my comment comes from the fact that I put people who are engaged in world making, and all people, there are lots of different people, and there are people at one end of the spectrum who are artists, and the other end of the spectrum maybe are engineers, and somewhere in between are craftspeople, and somewhere in between are this new idea of designers, right? So the world looks different depending on where you stand, right? That was one of the points that I was trying to make with this whole monsoon wedding argument, which is where Meera Nair stands is what Meera Nair sees and what Meera Nair wants to show. And so the idea of research again, so therefore my comments are colored by the fact that I'm a practitioner, and not an artistic practitioner, but a designer practitioner. And what that means is that the notion, this world has, on the one hand, traditions in engineering and derives from the formal and the reductive and, all this kind of ways of understanding the world. But on the other hand, it derives from art, and it derives from the humanities, and derives from all this. And it's a wonderful transdisciplinary approach. Therefore, would a single definition work is a question, because there isn't, because design by definition, in some sense, is a pragmatic resolution of a messy world, right? There is no ideal. And if there is no ideal, there isn't any ideal approach to, and particularly what we are saying is that the world is very complex, and the world is, all these systems, and it's messy, right? So if you try to reduce it and say that this is how you do it, then you've already lost something very essential. This idea of, what is this thing, right? You lost very. So I think, first and foremost, repeating what other people have said, research, the meaning of research depends. But I think what Shabari started with, and I think also Smriti said, it's fundamentally about, there is no research if you accept the given knowledge, right? If you accept that that's already out there, there's nothing more to understand, there is no research to be done, right? Research starts with this fundamental notion, I don't understand something, right? I'm not able to explain why I see what I see. I'm not able to quite place my finger on what should I do as a practitioner, as a pragmatic person, what should I do in order to change something, right? And I know the artists won't agree with me because, I have the intention of changing, but that's what a designer wants to do. It's like, this intentionality is fundamental to design. This intentionality of saying that I need to change something about this world, right, is what frames the research question for me, right? Somebody says design a Haveli. What do you mean, right? And it's got to be able to host a wedding. And what do you mean, right? I mean, I don't quite understand, right? So if I think I understand, then I make something, right? And we see it all around us, right? That's what design around us right now looks like, unquestioned, unexamined. So the moment you put on this hat that I am going to examine and understand, whatever you do in order to produce that knowledge and understanding is what you do, is what research is about. And I think Shabari brought up a very important question, term, epistemology. We think we have the methods that produce good knowledge. So yes, I'm conducting research, but I'm using methods that somebody's already given me and said, go do this and knowledge will be produced. And the idea of epistemology says, no, I'm questioning the processes by which I produce this knowledge. So being a designer, what makes it different is the fact that you are conscious of the processes that you're using for producing that knowledge. So there isn't, and that, by the way, is not fixed again, because a Shabari is different from me, is different. I use my body differently. I recognize the fact that I see the world differently. I'm short, I'm tall, I'm big, I'm thin, I'm a woman, I'm a man. I can see this is what I can get to and this is what I can't get to. And if you don't acknowledge that, then that's not research, right? So the research, the idea of research that says that I'm trying to produce new knowledge, I'm trying to not accept the given, and I'm aware of the processes that I'm using. I'm aware of the limitations of my body. I'm aware of the limitations of my method. And the big idea in research, I think, or this epistemology, is the idea of bounding. A lot of us do not know where the boundaries of our methods lie. We are not aware where the method works and where it doesn't work. Where should I, because somebody asked a question, and I can't exactly phrase it, but it was addressed to me. We don't lead with a method, at least as far as design is concerned. The idea that you lead with a method is itself flawed. The method should be for the issue at hand. What does this need? What do I need in order to understand this? And what do I have to make in order to understand this? And can I use this method? And where everything is bounded. The human body is bounded, the human capacity to know is bounded, and accepting that is so fundamental to the idea of what is research. So I think that's, and I'm colored by the fact that I think the world is made of systems. There is no getting away from it. And if you claim any understanding and claim that it is not system, without it being systemic, I would have a real problem in accepting. That's my idea.
Thank you. So we'll move on to two other questions which are a bit related. And I'm going to now take permission and read them out, because I think otherwise we're going to run out of time. So Krishna asks, while presenting a research in terms of performance, will there be a chance of wrong interpretation by the viewer, as there are things unsaid and fear for not conveying the intent? How do you deal with it? I'm just putting these two questions together because I do feel that they are such. Manali says, we saw various ways in which research can be conducted, but when it comes to implementation of the research in actual profession, how do you think we can make the best use of the information? And I think it also connects to where Sudhir you left it in terms of choice of methods or methodology. So would you want to pick it up, and then we can pass on the conversation to Smriti and Shabari?
Yeah, I'll just quickly refer back to the whole discussion in terms of Monsoon Wedding, right? I'm sorry if some of you haven't seen it, but the idea is that a director basically ultimately has to choose. What do I choose? Because it is significant, it is relevant, and it has something to do with what I believe. Out of all this, I distill and say that this is what it means to me, and this is what I want to put in front of you. So do I use all the research? Maybe not, right? I mean, I might have uncovered a lot of stuff, but the process of putting it together in the form of an artifact is a choice, is about selection, right? And what got done in Smriti's mother's house, or what those construction workers did, if we recognize that this is a very complex social process of conversations between the laborers and the architects, between the laborers and their supervisor, between them and the rest of the neighborhood along them, if we recognize the fact that that is the process that is ultimately deciding what gets done, So therefore, in our profession, the idea of choice is not, does not privilege a one particular person. If it does, then it could be deeply flawed, right? If there is no conversation, if there isn't a critique, if there isn't a place for multiple voices that have been allowed, right, to bring in. So therefore, I think the answer to your question is, it is the ultimate issue here is the choice. Design, I have a new definition of design. Design fundamentally is choosing, is the choice making, right? How do we choose what? Because if the answers were binary, they wouldn't come to designers. They come to designers because the answers are not binary. There isn't a yes or a no. There isn't a black or a white. And that's why they come to designers. Otherwise, you go to engineers or you go to scientists, right? And because our answers are not binary, it is therefore a dialectical process. It is a process of dialogue, right? How well do we conduct, how well do we use our quote unquote writing to foster a conversation so that the process of knowing doesn't end with our idea of research, right? That this is an ongoing process.
Thanks, Sudhir. So I would like to take this question to Shabari, because I think it very specifically talks about if I choose performance as a tool and if I'm not able to convey. So how would you address that question, Shabari?
So yeah, misunderstanding or misinterpretation. Yeah, text actually is famous for being misinterpreted. Actually, you know, how many times have you got like a WhatsApp message on your phone and you're not quite sure whether they're being rude or whether they're being funny, or whether, you know, why did we invent emojis? To convey tone, actually. I think misinterpretation is possible across all kinds of communication, whether it's, you know, performance and you use your body, whether it's text, whether it's an image, whether it's a song. So miscommunication or misunderstanding is possible everywhere. But that's where the magic lies. That's the exciting thing about it, because that's where meaning is actually made. I say something and you understand something. You bring your knowledge, your positionality, your experience, your desires to what I have to offer. And in that meeting is where knowledge is made. So I think, you know, kind of borrowing from what Sudhir was saying, me as the author of something, I need to make decisions about where and how I invite your subjectivity and make space for misunderstanding in a specific way. If that misunderstanding misfires, I've done a bad job. But if I can open it up in a way that allows for some understanding that only you can bring, I've done a good job. So I think misunderstanding exists, you know, misinterpretation exists across the board. Communication is, you know, inherently, there is a possibility for misunderstanding, but actually that's where the interesting discoveries and co-creation of knowledge actually occurs.
Shabari,
so performance or writing, sorry?
No, I just wanted to add when you're finished. I wanted to.
I'm
So Shabari does theater, and you know, a couple of years ago, we did a play in Cochin, right? And the thing is, we are used to doing plays in Bangalore, and you know, there are typical English-speaking audiences, and blah blah blah. And then we take a play that has a South African context, and it uses language from South Africa, and it has references to South Africa. And then we go and then perform it in I think Cochin or Trivandrum, I forget where it was. And the audience on that particular day was mostly non-English speaking, you know, college educated, but non-comfortable with the thing and didn't have all the. And so therefore the interpretation, or, you think that you have put together something that, that should be understood. That's so obvious, right? And then you realize that you're just not getting a response. Your people aren't responding because they're just not getting it, right? And so that is a conversation. Failure is not a problem. But if we didn't pick up from that and said, and so if you're smart, you would have had that conversation before, right? And said that, I need this thing, because Waiting for Godot, this is one of those famous plays, if you don't know, right? One of the first times it got a great response was when it was performed in front of prisoners. It was prisoners who understood what all flat all the time, right? The notion is, if we understood
but
this process.
similarly, language, if I was given a paper to read in Arabic, I can't understand it. So language has the same limitation.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Even when we understand the language, I mean, there's no denying that even if I understand English, I can say for myself at least that I'm trained to think in English, unfortunately now over so many years, but still between what somebody's written from Cornell and what somebody's written from National University of Singapore and what I write, we have seen in communications and conferences, it is understood completely differently. The same language, which we think is otherwise a universal language, which it is not. Yeah. Smriti, how would you respond to this question? And then we can move on.
Chita, you're going to have to repeat the question for me.
Okay. I keep to the generic one, which is like, we saw various ways in which research can be conducted. But when it comes to implementation of the research in actual profession, how do you think we can make best use of the information? So it's basically about making the choice of the form or the representation versus the information, so that the information doesn't get compromised. That's by Manali.
Right.
So when do you decide that it's time to use video? Just because you like it? No, but you must have your own reasons to decide when do you use video as a format. So if you could use that as an example.
So because I'm an artist, I use video as a language, right? More than even a tool. For me, moving image becomes the language that I use in crafting narratives, and I tell stories. The stories need research, and that's what then prompts the form.
Right.
And like I said, there are many times, especially when I was doing this project with the migrant laborers, where I was confronted with the fact that actually my camera is my biggest handicap. In which case, do I abandon the research just because at that point I considered myself to be a video artist? No. I had to change my method and say that if my tool has become my handicap, I need to change the tool. I don't need to change the work that I am doing. I have to respond to what is in front of me, and I have to find the right tool to respond in a way that continues that dialogue. So you might find that something that you had set your mind on doesn't work, doesn't matter. It doesn't mean that puts an end to anything. It just means that you need to find something else to approach it in a different way. So with my interviews, for instance, I spent all this time developing my relationship with this one family. And there was this little girl, Jyotika, who was all of maybe 6 or 8 years old. Now, I developed my own equation with her. And one day I decided, okay, I want to actually interview her. So I went, and I didn't know the language. I was working with so many laborers, all different languages. Video allows you to use this, to allow people to speak. So I had to take a translator. We sat with Jyotika. I put the camera there, and her entire demeanor changed. Suddenly, she became very shy. Otherwise, she would be very playful with me. but the camera changed that. And I still did the interview, but I brought it back and it just didn't work. I said, is this the voice of Jyotika that I want to represent? No, it's not, because this is not her. After much thinking, I decided, you know what, like, camera is not working, leave the camera. I took a sound recorder, went back with the translator, and did the interview like a game. So sort of improvised on the format of the interview as well. So I wasn't asking her questions. I was drawing little things on the floor and asking her to respond to that to get to the same answer. And then there was no face. The interview did not need her face. Her voice was so strong that I was then able to leverage that to really represent what it was that she had to offer.
I think that's a very, very pertinent example to give, where we've seen that the camera changes the response of the interviewee. And that's a clue enough. But also where you started off is, I think, a good reminder for our conversation that we're not only talking about diverse forms for representation, we are actually starting with saying diverse forms for research. So I'm just repeating these things for the simplicity of the students, because I understand these were very different perspectives. So when Shabari started with the whole idea and the exercises that she sort of put us through was to understand that you can collect information through body, you can collect information through emotions, and then coming on to Smriti when she said collecting information through videography. So you're first doing that if that is the most suitable tool. And then so on and so forth. If you think game playing is one of the tools, or if you think making illustrations is a better way to research, then try that. And once you have collected that information, what Sudhir said, that you use that information to tell you how it is best communicated. So while you might have done the interviews on video or audio, if you think making an illustration out of it is a better way to communicate what is happening, or a literary work, that's the translation which you are arriving at. So it's not really saying that they are both mirror of each other. What you research through is exactly what you have to give it back. Because I read, I wrote it down. Because I photographed, I make a visual essay. No, it's about that translation in between which you are understanding. And perhaps that is why, Manali, I'm also reinterpreting your question, which is also saying, how do I do it in actual professional life? I think it doesn't change then. So whether you are a researcher, whether you are a practicing designer, whether you are a performer, whether you are a systems thinker and a strategic designer in a company, once you have understood this conceptual position, it doesn't matter whether I'm doing it for an art installation or I'm doing it to design furniture for Godrej. It's this process which you are engaging in. I'm going to go to the third question, which is for all of you. And then if we have time, some more specific questions. This one says, how do you formulate and link psychological aspects to architecture and design, more specifically through understanding of systems thinking? The student or participant hasn't written their name, but I think it's a very good question, because a lot of them want to work with perception, want to work with how does color affect, how does light affect our behavior. So they all want to move into those spaces. But we always warn them that, you're not trained to understand the psychological effect or impact of something. So if you guys could share some comments on that.
You want me to go first, or whoever wants to go? I think this is perhaps one of the most difficult questions that humanity is facing, right? I think we are all extremely confident about how we change the world. And most often more often than not, we have a lot of mess around us, right? Things that aren't quite what we would like the world to be. All kinds of issues, right? So the question is, I think the premise is that we haven't understood the system. And the reason I actually used a film today instead of something else, there was a reason for that. And the reason was that if we were to look at it purely from the event manager's perspective, then the systems we design are how do we get flowers to this wedding properly, and how do we erect a, a shamiana, and what should the sound system be, and blah blah blah, right? Those are technical systems. Those are systems we think we understand. What actually is important, perhaps, in order to create a new good experience is to understand all the other systems that have a role, that play a role in shaping this experience, right? And that implies we understand worldviews. What Meera Nair was trying to point to us was she was pointing us to worldviews. She was pointing us to values. She was pointing us to discrepancies in, or the conflicts, or the lack of consensus, or the existence of consensus in the way people saw the world, in the way people understood what it means to be married, what it means to be in love, what is family, all these questions that were revealed. And none of these questions all have deeper roots. They have roots in our psychology. They have roots in our philosophies. They have roots in our culture, right? And so I think the idea of systems is not some inanimate idea. The idea of systems actually says that just like in our brains, we have a right brain and a left brain, and the right brain, the left brain tends to be, what I possess, and right is what Shabari and, Smriti dominate. But it isn't, the world isn't like that. The world has both these things. And what we have failed to do is to find a way to link them, right? So if you're asking that question about psychology and all this kind of stuff, that is precisely the problem. The problem is, how do we bring that understanding of who we are individually and collectively? When Shabari opens her eyes to the fact that the body can understand, and when Smriti is talking about all these other dynamics that are going on, that is not mechanistic, that is not reductive, and that is shedding light on precisely those things that are so strong. Because there is a quote that goes around, I don't know if you guys are architects, I've never heard it, but culture eats software for breakfast, right? There's a famous quote of some sorts, at least in the technology industry, that says culture eats software for breakfast. And what does that mean? And that it precisely rituals, practices, beliefs, worldviews, values, all of these things actually decide what that AI robot will do, what machine intelligence will do, what artificial intelligence will do. And so it is learning to notice, learning to see that the system includes all this other stuff that we left out, the people that we left out. In Smriti's argument, it's all these construction workers and others that we never thought about, right? And also our own deeper, personal deeper issues, like what shapes us, what makes us the way we are, how do we think this way, and the collective in which we are embedded. The family system that the Verma family is involved in shapes the way they think, shapes their preferences, shapes their ways of deciding this issue of choice. And stepping away from this thing, Meera Nair as a designer is also shaped by the fact that she is embedded in these systems, but she's also in Canada. And she's a Canadian, in some sense, she's a Canadian filmmaker, and she's bringing her understanding of what, what she sees or what she believes is important. Like yesterday, I was asking, somebody asked a question about White Tiger, and I was listening to, I'm not seen the movie, but I was listening to Priyanka Chopra describe, right, how she saw what she saw, or she wanted to make. And that's precisely it, right? There's a lot of research, and she was describing how the actor researched what that part was, right? And what world they were coming together to create. So yeah, I think psychology, I think there isn't, you can't read the script, you can't memorize the script, because people who memorize the script and act, we call them hams, right? And hamming is the worst kind of acting. And there she's, Priyanka Chopra in that interview said a very interesting thing. This guy who acted like Balram, he wasn't acting, he became Balram. So our challenge is to make the world be and become, and not impose something on it, right? And so that is the challenge. And if you don't want to impose, you have to honor what it is. And if you honor what it is, you understand that the psychology and the sociology and the politics and their culture, all of that becomes important, right? Which is why the systems thinking idea isn't pipes and flows and pumps and motors and all this kind of stuff. It is this, right? At least for social
Thank you,
systems.
Sudhir. Yeah, that makes sense. Shabari, would you want to answer that any differently?
I don't know if she's there. She's probably not here.
No, I'm here. But I think that was a really kind of comprehensive answer, and I think we are probably kind of running out of time. So maybe if we have one last other question.
And one other thing to the question that Sudhir answered.
Yes.
I just have one other thing to say. I think that while you're looking outside to find answers to questions, I'll go back to where Shabari started this today, where it's good to also just take a pause and think about your own experience and not to discount that. Sometimes it's a good idea to start from the self before you move on to what is outside or what others have to say about it. If you're thinking color, just think about how colors make you feel, right? Before you start to think about what color must I use to make someone else feel. What does color do to me? And your answer can lie in that space for some time. Let that sink in before you go out to see what else is out there. Yeah.
Nice. Smriti, that's wonderful. To bringing back the self. So if I might take your permission, all three of you, could we reply to all of the questions, say in a written form? Because it's already 1:05. I know they all might have other classes. It's lunchtime, and I also still need 10 minutes with them to wrap up after you all have left. So if that's okay, because I don't want to pick and choose a question over the other, so I went only with the ones which were for all three of you. And I'll send you all the other questions, even the one which is from one of the external participants, one or two of them, and we'll make sure that we email everybody your responses. Is that a good idea?
Yes.
Okay. So then with that, I think I must say my thank yous again. Thank you to all the three speakers, every participant who's been here all throughout, including the students and the external guests. And most importantly, for Nidhi and Anshula's help as teaching associates for holding the fort for us to be able to have this conversation. Thank you so much, everyone. And except for the students, everyone else will drop out of this call. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you.